Good evening. My name is Dr. Anna Cohen, and I'm the founder and chair of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day commemoration presented to you by the Jewish Federation of Sarasota-Manatee. The mission of the Jewish Federation is to strengthen Jewish life, culture, and identity in our community, provide for Jewish people in need, and promote support for Israel. We fulfill our mission by supporting programs and projects that care for the vulnerable in Sarasota-Manatee, in Israel, and all around the world. Our federation has a long-standing commitment to Holocaust education, which is even more vital in our contentious society. We support our schools and encourage them to educate the next generation about the lessons of the Holocaust to create a world without prejudice and hate. Thanks to our survivor speakers Bureau, the Federation is ensuring the stories of our local survivors and their families are being told. Tonight's commemoration will pay tribute and honor the memory of the women of the Holocaust, many of whom remain unsung heroes. Approximately 2 million women perished, while some were in the resistance, some, both Jewish and non-Jewish, were saving Jewish lives, all while risking their own, and others were those who survived. Through the Holocaust, Jewish women revealed their strengths in the face of adversity. When their husbands and loved ones were being sent to concentration camps, women adapted to their new reality by doing what they felt was best to help keep themselves and their families safe. They would seek work outside the home. They would arrange for immigration to other countries. They did all they could to create a sense of normalcy. Women went underground and played a role through their involvement in the Jewish partisan resistance movement, such as smuggling documents and weapons. Thanks to their Aryan features, they were able to slip in and out of the Gestapo offices while carrying out the most dangerous missions of anti-Nazi Jewish resistance. At the concentration camps, the Nazis first determined who would go to work and who would be put to death. Pregnant women, accompanied by young children or those deemed incapable of hard labor, were sent straight to the gas chambers. Those who remained were frequently subjected to brutal persecution, sexual harassment, rape, verbal abuse, and used for human experimentation by the Nazis. Nevertheless, they persisted. To survive, the remaining Jewish women created mutual assistance groups to share food, information, and became surrogate mothers and sisters, offering protection to one another and the children. Women who were active in the aid and rescue operations of the Jews in German-occupied Europe, at great risk to themselves and their families, were also non-Jews. Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Authority in Israel, has recognized 27,712 of these brave upstanders hailing from 51 different countries as righteous among the nations. Over half of them were women. All of the memories and stories of the women of the Holocaust teach us to have the courage to stand up and resist all expressions of hate, and to help create a world of peace for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen, for your contributions, commitment, and support of this annual commemoration. My name is Isaac Calvaria, and this is my wife, Vivian. And on behalf of the Jewish Federation of Sarasota-Manatee, we thank you for joining us today. We are honored to be your hosts for today's commemoration. Each year, January 27th is declared as International Holocaust Remembrance Day by the United Nations. As Dr. Cohen shared, today's commemoration honors the women of the Holocaust. One such woman is my late mother of blessed memory, whose story is quite remarkable. I'm going to hand you over to Vivian to give you a summary of her story.
It took 15 years for me to extract from Rivka, she was not a willing partner in this, fragments of her Holocaust story. It was an exhaustive undertaking, mostly unsatisfying, since vast chunks of information were missing from the timeline. Information I would come to learn too painful for her to recount. In June of 2001, she plopped down on a chair in my office and said, "I'm ready." I grabbed a video cam recorder and interviewed her over weeks, months, and years. The result is her tortuous journey of survival, chronicled in the book, My Name is Not Rivka. The Polish village of Zakrzewicz lies about 180 miles from Lublin. It was here in a shtetl of 1,500 people that Regina Zemmel, she later changed her name to Rivka, was born and raised, the youngest of 5 children. In 1942, Regina's sister Heike was visiting the shtetl with her 2-year-old daughter Hannah. When the Jews of Zakrzewicz learned the Nazis had begun rounding up Jewish communities in neighboring shtetls and transporting them to Treblinka, a death camp. It was clear it wouldn't be long before Zakrzewicz would suffer the same fate. Plans were made to escape when disaster befell the family. Heike, Regina's adored sister, was murdered by 2 Nazis, shot as she took off running, the Nazis in pursuit on horseback. The family was immediately rounded up with 500 other villagers from her shtetl and marched to a nearby railway station where thousands of Jews from the Krajnik district under heavy guard were being forced into cattle cars. Destination Treblinka. Amid the chaotic boarding process, all of them broken-hearted and in utter shock at Heike's murder, as the train pulled out of the station, Regina's father pushed her out of the cattle car seconds before the doors closed. And so began Rivka's tortuous journey. She was 14 years old. Dazed, shocked, Regina lay on the railway platform and watched in disbelief as the train left the station carrying her family. She began to run after the train. A woman who had witnessed the scene took off after her, grabbed her hand and said, "Come with me." The two pushed through the teeming crowds and raced to a forest bordering the train station, where they hid for 28 days until Nazi soldiers discovered them. They were taken back to the station and boarded a train to Budzin, a labor camp. Briefly, Regina remained in Budzin for 18 months until she was transported to a salt mine, where she worked underground for several months before being transported to Krakow Plaza, a labor camp under the command of Amon Goeth, famously portrayed in Schindler's List, a cold-blooded murderer whose lust for cruelty and torture knew no bounds. From there, she was transferred to Schindler's enamel factory, where she worked until she was transferred again with 1,000 inmates to Czechoslovakia, where Schindler had relocated the factory. In between, 300 women were inadvertently sent to Auschwitz, Rivka being among them, and Schindler, as those of us who are familiar with the story, famously rescued them. Back at the factory, on May the 8th, 1944, 8 months after their arrival, the Jewish workers listened to Churchill's victory speech being piped through the factory. They were free. At this point in the story, I want to point out that at each step of the way, Regina escaped death by an eyelash. Regina returned to Zakrzewicz only to discover that the Polish peasants now occupied her parents' house. Many Jews had lost their lives trying to reclaim their homes, businesses, and possessions upon their return, only to be beaten and in some instances killed. Regina fearlessly confronted the occupants and narrowly escaped with her life. She remained in Zakrzewicz for 3 weeks, hoping her parents and other family members would miraculously appear. They didn't, and she had to face a new reality. She was alone in a hostile Europe, still rife with anti-Semitism. In 1946, Rivka fled to a DP camp in Italy, where she met her future husband, Chaim, and a year later boarded a ship, the Wedgwood, for Israel. She married Chaim and gave birth to her first son, Isaac, next to me, 6 years later. The three immigrated to southern Rhodesia, where a second son, Leon, was born. I married Zach in 1976. We have 3 children and 6 grandchildren.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Kolod balev av penimal nefesh Yehudi homiyad ulfatei mizrach kadimal ayin letzion Sophia. Od lo avda tikvatenu ha-tikva shnot alpayim liodam chovshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim liodam chovshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim.
Today, we ask God's blessing on the women of the Holocaust. We honor those who survived, those who died, those who gave their lives in service to loved ones, service to strangers, to community, and to God. Since moving to Sarasota nearly 30 years ago, I have been privileged to meet many women survivors. Some tell their stories willingly, some hesitantly, some not at all. When they do, those of us listening know that we are in the presence of living history, a history that is rapidly fading as they age and pass away. But every time one dies in her 80s or 90s, I weep and then I smile, thinking about their children and their grandchildren, their legacy of life and love. I want to tell you about a woman who I never met, who didn't survive the Holocaust, yet left a legacy that lives on today. As a woman rabbi, I follow in the footsteps of Rabbi Regina Jonas. Her story is worth telling. The New York Times ran her obituary just this past year and called her, quote, "the woman on whose shoulders all female rabbis stand." She was the first ever fully ordained woman rabbi. Becoming a rabbi was not easy for Jonas. Rabbis at the Academy for the Science of Judaism in Berlin in the 30s were happy to teach her, but the only door open to her was teaching children, not official ordination. That was not good enough. As she later said, quote, "the duty of men and women alike is to work and create according to the skills given by God." In 1930, Jonas wrote a thesis that asked, can women serve as rabbis? She argued that only habit stood in the way, not Jewish law. 5 years later, a liberal rabbi agreed that she was just as learned and deserving as any male rabbi and conferred formal ordination upon her. As the Nazi regime rose, Jonas, like so many others, was urged to leave Germany. She refused. In the spring of 1939, she wrote in a Jewish newspaper that the Nazi persecution was, quote, "a trial by fire, testing the strength of our love for children, our gratitude, the mutual support of family and friends in these alien conditions." Jonas and her mother were deported to Theresienstadt and then transferred to Auschwitz, where she was murdered in 1942. It is told that in the camps she ministered to her fellow Jews, leading services, praying over the sick and ailing, giving support to those around her. She did more than merely break a 2,000-year-old glass ceiling. She taught us about courage and devotion to community and devotion to God. Today, we ask God's blessing on the women of the Holocaust, the children and adults who died and those who lived, and their children and their children's children. May our Jewish communities around the world flourish, fighting anti-Semitism and hatred in all its forms, as we honor the memories of those who went before us. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Singer. We will now hear from Shep Englander, CEO of the Jewish Federation of Sarasota-Manatee, who will share a few words.
I'm Shep Englander. I'm the CEO at the Jewish Federation, and one of the reasons I chose this career is because I grew up with cousins, my father's first cousins, Elsa and Irene, who were the only two survivors of his family. In their early teen years, they felt they needed to leave their small village to go to Prague to earn some money as seamstresses, where they ended up in the Prague ghetto and then Bergen-Belsen. They survived because Elsa decided that the only thing that mattered in her life was to make sure to protect her younger sister and to do everything humanly possible. And I still remember the many holidays we shared and the taste of their noodle-kugel. Despite the unspeakable horrors that they lived through and that Elsa would sometimes share some scenes of, they did not harbor hate, they did not have grudges, and they knew that love was the answer. I think of them every day. They are my heroes, and they remind me of the fierce courage and determination that women who lived through the Holocaust or perished had to summon every day. That's why this year's focus for Holocaust Remembrance Day is so apt and important, and why the Jewish Federation believes that Holocaust education is so urgently needed and such a high priority.
We now have the distinct honor and privilege of hearing from Dr. Yehuda Bauer, a globally renowned Holocaust historian, prolific author, founding editor of the Journal of Holocaust and Genocide Studies, professor emeritus of History and Holocaust Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and academic advisor to Yad Vashem. Fluent in 8 languages, Professor Bauer was born in 1926, and at the age of 72 in 1998, was awarded the Israel Prize, the highest civilian award in Israel. In 2001, he was elected a member of the Israeli Academy of Science. Professor Bauer will provide us a historical context of women in the Holocaust.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to address you on, and I was asked to concentrate on the question of women during the Holocaust. And of course, one can talk about Jewish women. One can talk about the participation of German women in the perpetrator class and those who did the Holocaust. Now, I want to concentrate on the Jewish women. And the Holocaust caused a certain reversal of roles of women in Jewish life, in life generally. The reversal of roles that the women had to look after in some ways of earning some kind of means of survival, and at the same time looking after the family meant that their responsibility became quite different from that before the war. The public life, if you like to put it that way, or political life, was in the hands of men who were forced by the Germans to do what the Germans wanted. And the women were, in a sense, free to deal with the other things. It doesn't mean to say that men were not involved. They were involved. And the attempts of self-help, of trying to organize survival, economic survival, first of all, was primarily the work of men, but to turn this into the practice, into the question of the actual work that had to be done, this was done very largely by women. Now, slowly, as the time went on and the Jewish community was more and more being attacked by German policies, the role of the women as the person responsible in the household was much stronger than that before the war. In the resistance group, in the groups that had to, that tried to fight the German policies, whether without arms at the beginning and then during the period of destruction as well, and of course during the period of the attempts at rebellion that took place not only in Warsaw but in other places as well, the leadership, the official leadership, if you like to put it that way, was mostly in the hands of men. But the influence, the impact of women was much larger. And if you take the example, for instance, of the Warsaw Ghetto Rebellion, where the main movement that rebelled, the Jewish Resistance Organization, led by Mordechai Yankelevich, was led by a man, a charismatic personality, but it was a committee. And in that committee, the role of the women was crucial, especially that of the person who helped Mordechai Yankelevich more than anyone else, the Sylvia Lubetkin, the wife of the deputy of Mordechai Yankelevich. So you had in a way, a reversal of roles. But it's not only in Poland that you have that. You have that in France. You have that in the Czech, what today is the Czech Republic, the protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. You had it in Slovakia. You had it in Germany originally, that the role of the women was now much more central than the role of the women before the war. The memory of the role of the women during the Holocaust, I think, is a crucial element in understanding what took place. Now, My time is very limited, so I want to conclude by saying that the study of gender during the Holocaust is something that more and more takes place in academia and in memorials and so on and so forth. I think that there is a difference. For the Germans, there was no difference. Jewish women were destined to death just as Jewish men were. There was absolutely no difference. But from an inner Jewish perspective, I think there was a difference. And that difference has to be studied and has to be remembered. Thank you very much.
I'm Rabbi Alyssa Joy Osterklein, and this is my daughter, who's 4 years old, Beatrice. We're going to be singing together Anima Amin, which means I believe. The words that we're singing are, I believe with perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah. And when we're talking about the Messiah, we're talking about a time of peace. And it's so meaningful that the next generation is singing it with me together, because we can put our hope and our faith that with a partnership with God, that the next generation will bring us that era of peace. The tune that we're singing was sung on a train to Treblinka and then was passed on through various people over the time of the Holocaust. Ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, b'emunah shema, b'biat HaMashiach, b'biat HaMashiach ani ma'amin, b'biat HaMashiach, b'biat HaMashiach ani ma'amin.
We are thrilled to now introduce Dr. David Senesh, the nephew of inspirational Zionist role model and hero Hannah Senesh. He's a world-renowned clinical psychologist based in Israel, specializing in post-traumatic stress disorder, moral resilience, and restorative processes. Dr. Senesh will speak of his aunt's courage and heroism during World War II that will always be revered, and whose poetry and prose will always be remembered. Following Dr. Senesh, the Federation's Jesse Sheslow will offer a moving musical rendition of Eli Eli, written by Hannah Senesh.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about my aunt, the late Hannah Senesh, by request of the organizers of the important event that you are having. And I can tell you a little bit about her beyond what is already known from her diary, from the many books written about her, from the movie and the theater, and many research works that were done. Of course, here in Israel, she is, I would say, the number one female hero. In Israel, we have too many heroes, but she really stands out. So I'll just give a short synopsis of her story, because I think many of you might already know the story. And after 1933, that the political atmosphere throughout Europe became more and more dangerous, then my grandmother decided to send her son, that is my father, to go to continue to study in France. And by doing so, she thought that he will be safe. And then when Hannah graduated from high school, she would go to a place where being Jewish didn't matter, because everybody was Jewish, and that was Palestine at that time. On her part, she thought that she is going to go to continue studying, but then she decided not only to arrive in Palestine, but to change completely by becoming a farmer. And she wanted to join one of the youngest kibbutzim that was established there. As she became more and more concerned with the situation in Europe, she worried mainly for her brother that now was in Spain in jail, and she was worried about her mother that was left in Budapest. And of course, she was very concerned about the situation where the news about what was happening in Europe started to filter into other places like the US, Palestine. And she decided that she's going to do something about it. And this is where the story starts to be really outstanding, because as you know, most people are concerned, but not very likely to do anything about it at that time and also at this time. But there are a few people who would go and volunteer, and she did. So there was a small group of youngsters in Palestine, from young people who just arrived from Europe, from different countries, and they decided to form a unit. The British Army was interested in that group, and they had a deal with the Zionist leadership that they will train, the British Army will train this group of 30 youngsters, and they will train them to become intelligence officers, spies actually, and each one will be sent to the country of origin where he came from, and so that he knows the culture, he knows the language, he can mingle in, and he can manage there somehow without being caught. But before he does that, or she does that, they will have to do some few tasks for the British Army, and that was the deal. Of course, the Zionist leaders and the British commanders, they knew that people who go there have slim chances of coming back. And also the young people knew it. So the group of youngsters from different kibbutzim were assembled by the British Army and was trained. And when they were ready to go on a mission, they had to go to Cairo to get organized to be parachuted into occupied Europe. My father, George, just arrived to the shores of Palestine, and at that time, Jewish people who arrived as refugees, like refugees today, they were not granted entry. But since she was a British officer, she could work it out somehow, and she managed to get him out of detention. And he was then had opportunity to be with his sister. Hannah and George had one day together, and they spent a day in Tel Aviv. There are pictures taken, and we can see them together there. It was the first day that they were together, and the last day. She didn't tell him exactly what was the mission, because she was not allowed to. It was a secret mission. But my father always said that she didn't tell the mission because he would talk her out of it. But she went with a group to Cairo, and from there they were parachuting in Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia, and they were linking with the partisans over there. And each group was preparing to cross the border to a different country of origin, and she was destined to go to Hungary. And the mission that Hannah was about to carry out was to steer some unrest and encourage people just not to cooperate with the community leaders and with the Gestapo and the Germans, and to run away. It was almost the end of the war, and people could rescue themselves if they would have run away. So that was the mission in a nutshell. But the moment she crossed the border, she was caught. and she was caught by the Hungarian patrol and handed over to the Gestapo, which were very, very interested in her because she was a British officer and British spy, and they wanted some of the secret codes that she had, and she decided not to give the information, and she was very badly tortured. They tried to put more pressure on her by bringing her mother, who living there in Budapest, and the mother, of course, thought that Hannah was in Palestine, safe and sound. But then they brought them together in a room, to the great surprise of the mother, that she couldn't figure out. When she saw Hannah, she couldn't recognize her because she was so beaten up. And they told both women that if they are not going to end up giving the information, both of them will be executed. Hannah decided not to give the information, and the mother went on and cooperated with her decision. The mother was also put in jail, the same jail, and eventually put on the death march to Germany. But Hannah was put on a trial because not only was she a British spy and a British officer and a Jewish person, she was also a Hungarian traitor, according to the Hungarian authorities. So she was put on trial and she was condemned to death, given some opportunity to ask for forgiveness, which she refused. And just about short time before the Russians came in, the Americans were approaching from the other side. It was really almost the end of the war. She was executed by the Hungarians, and very soon after, she was promoted to be a national hero in Israel. So this is the story of a remarkable young woman. She was 23 years old by the time that she died, and she left behind an amazing literature work and amazing legacy that continues up to this day. So this is really very, very short, like in a nutshell, just to share with you the story, and I think it's giving us an opportunity to think about her, to think about ourselves, about her mission and about her legacy and the lessons that we can learn from her story. I thank you very much for your attention.
Eli, Eli, שלא ייגמר בעולם, החול והים, רשרוש של המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם, החול והים, רשרוש של המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם.
We will now have the opportunity to hear the extraordinary story of Judith Silverman, a survivor of Ravensbrook, the only concentration camp solely for women. Born in Koryma, Slovakia, Judith is now living in New Jersey. She is a retired social worker and psychotherapist and is an acclaimed author and poet. She is a proud mother of 3 children and the grandmother of 5 grandchildren.
I am Judith Silverman, a survivor of Ravensbrook concentration camp, brought here from Czechoslovakia at age 14 and a half. Say the name, announce, pronounce, recite the name. 6 million times the name. You master race who smashed and gassed, erased the name. You callous world disdain their fate, I order you to script, engrave, imprint the name, and say, and say, and say the name. When every name is said and heard, repeat the name again, again. May you outlive eternity and say the name eternally. God, please attend. God, please assure that every name is accounted for. I write this poem to jolt the world into remembrance, and I write this poem for purposeful remembrance, to impress upon the world that the Holocaust was not inevitable. The Holocaust was made by people, and people can and people must prevent it from happening again. Today, on this International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I'm thinking of the women of Ravensbrook. I'm thinking of the women of Ravensbrook every day, survivorship territory, this place, that other place, lived in simultaneously. Ravensbrook, the women's camp, built in 1939 for 800 prisoners. By the end of the war, 132,000 women and children passed through Ravensbrook. Though not officially regarded as an extermination camp, it is estimated that around 80,000 women died there. The beautiful Lake Swetsey is the inevitable marker of Nazi inhumanity. The lake is the cemetery of the ashes of women from 40 countries, the ashes of the murdered Roma, Jehovah's Witnesses, Jews, Russian soldiers, prostitutes, political prisoners, and others and others and others. The mothers of Lidice, children from everywhere. These were the deemed enemies of the Reich. My death sentence is proclaimed when I am 12, my crime being Jewish. The criminalization of being Jewish being the basis of the final solution, the murder of 6 million Jews. My father, Ella, says, to hell with you, Har, we will defy, we will survive. Every member of my family attempted the harsh route of survival, but my father died in Katz at Sachsenhausen, my mother, Ilona, in Seret. 9-year-old brother Karpuk was gassed in Auschwitz. My sister Miriam survived in hiding by a brave Christian family. And I survived Ravensbrück. I, prisoner, resist and survive. Around me, prisoners resist and die. Dare no one say they went to death like sheep. It is not the behavior of the victims we should be questioning. It is the inhumanity of the murderers we must accuse. Today I'm old, but my parents are younger than my children. The women of Ravensbrück. Help is not allowed, not to give or receive. I witnessed a prisoner trying to take her sister's place in the work line. Her sister is sick and so weak. The prisoner is beaten to death. The sick sister is marched off to work. I forced myself to watch the beating, to give the woman a human connection. Though by now she's probably unconscious or dead. Violence, the essence of the Third Reich, carried out in Ravensbrück. In Ravensbrück, the Nazis not only murder human beings, but work to eliminate human values as well. Ravensbrück was the training school for female camps. 3,500 German women trained in Nazi ideology, the state-sanctioned hate and brutality. In no other place can a friend say and do and be a friend of such magnitude as here, where a friend can say and do and be a friend so minimally. Yes, human connections are verboten, but you must have a human connection to share a potato, to prod your non-existent energy, to jolt you into survival wish. Resistance. At first I ran out of the washroom because the floor is covered with dead women's bodies and the frenzied feeding rats, always. The rats feed upon the dead, the lice upon the living. Ravensbrück harvest. At first I ran out, but then I go back in again. I go back in every morning at 3:30 a.m. before roll call to wash in the rusty basin. There's usually no water in the tap, but opening the tap, though empty, I feel empowered. Back home in Kurima we washed. I will continue the ritual, my survival brick, my resistance. President Roosevelt will be our Messiah. He will rescue us. I write a letter to President Roosevelt and then a P.S. The P.S. Jewish prisoners are not allowed mail. We cannot send it or receive it. Thousands, millions such letters are written to you from Sachsenhausen and Ravensbrook and Buchenwald and Dachau. Do not send, read them. I vouch for their urgency, accuracy. Here the margin between life and death is so microscopic. Go by our time. Signed, prisoner Judita Sternova. The gypsy girl has one shoe, the left shoe. She hobbles and asks every woman in her path, Mutter, mother, 50, 100, 1,000, Mutter, Mutter, Mutter. The gypsy girl never gets it right. Will anyone call her name, call her daughter? Sometimes a woman adopts a lost or orphan child. I see such tenderness between the woman and the child she cares for, or tries to. Anka cares for little Hanichka, a Czech girl. On this day, when Anka returns from Appel, Hanichka is gone. Selected, we all know. On this day, even the brutal Blockältester, the prisoner supervisor, does not stop Anka from screaming, for she knows the SS are not distant, heading for comfort after the 3-hour Appel. She knows it is safe to scream. Ravensbrook victory. Anka loses her child but is allowed to scream. Ravensbrook victory. Are you not tempted, Lord, to lend a hand, prevent the scream? My friend Regina's baby dies. The baby dies. Not all at once. The baby is willing, but soon the juices stop flowing. I walk by and save my screams for later. Lord, that particular pain is too much for me. You have it and be branded. It was said that Ravensbrück was the capital of Nazi crime against women. This fact is irrefutable. But unfortunately, no camp was devoid of crime against women, or men, or children. In Ravensbrück, German doctors performed medical experiments on prisoners, mostly Polish women. The medical results were useless. Many of the victims are murdered and some saved at great risk to fellow prisoners. Depravity exists and prisoners' self-sacrifice also exists. The Siemens factory used slave labor to build armaments. Hitler's law. Work them as much as possible, feed them as little as possible, then let them die. Replacements follow. Vernichtung durch Arbeit. Women sometimes share recipes. We do not talk of family, too painful. But the recipes connect, a fantasy food connection. Sometimes we sing, but never German songs, except when forced on the work march, singing another craving connection to our private world, prior world. Today the world is a mess, genocides continue, democracies are in danger, anti-Semitism is on the rise. But we do not accept anti-Semitism, never again. My tale inhabits me. I write the book, A Survivor's Tale, and the book, The Empty Bowl, to give visibility and voice to the human connections whose lives were disconnected, murdered. And today I also feel the gratitude of all survivors, gratitude that once we survived, a sated body and no lies did not suffice. In there we thought such fate to be the kindest fate. Today, life lived on 2 tracks, but life lived. Today, COVID is contagious and goodness is contagious. Let us eliminate the virus and let us make goodness happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. We now have the absolute pleasure of seeing student artists from Pineview School as they present and surprise some of our local Holocaust survivors with the magnificent sketches they created in their image, so that we will always remember and keep them close to us.
Hi, Hi, I'm Eva Wasilewski. I drew a portrait of Felicia Lieben, born 1934 in Krakow, Poland.
I'm Tanner Isaacs. I drew a picture of Marlies Gluck, born 1940 in the Netherlands.
My name is Kaylin Wiggins, and I portrayed Rivka Glatz, born 1937 in Hungary, and Jeanette Hirsch, born 1927 in Paris, France.
I'm Alexandria Call, and I drew Peter Konstam, who was born in 1936 in Amsterdam, as well as Helga Melmed, who was born in 1927 in Berlin, Germany.
In memory of the 6 million Jews who did not survive the Holocaust, together we are lighting a candle so that we will never forget.
We ask you to please stand together with us as we begin a new tradition by marking International Holocaust Remembrance Day with the sounding of the horn, played by Cadet Thomas Canales from the Sarasota Military Academy. When the horn stops, if you are able, please remain standing as we remember those whom we have lost and who will forever be in our hearts, while cantors Marcy Vitkus and Rissel Bain sing a special rendition of the prayer El Malei Rachamim, followed by Rabbi Singer, who will recite the Mourner's Kaddish.
שוכן שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיעות מאירים ומזהירים את נשמות כל אחינו בני הנשים, נשים וטף ויתר אנשים, נשים וטף שנהרגו ושנטבחו ושנשרפו ושנחנקו קדוש השם בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם Anaba harachamim Hastireim beseter kenafecha leolamim Utzeror bitzeror Hachayim et nishmotechem Adonai hu nachalatam v'yanuchu b'shalom b'shalom al mishkevoteihem
Yitgadal, v'yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach Yerutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'yimeru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevorach, le'olam omei omaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, Shmei Dekudesha, B'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'ama v'yimeru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, huya aseh shalom, Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'yimeru. Amen.
We are now joined by members of the Generations After group to recite the Hands Against Hate pledge, promising to help make our community a safer and more peaceful place filled with love.
I pledge to stand up and resist hate, bigotry, and bullying. I will not stay silent in the face of intolerance. I will work with my neighbors to create kinder, safer, and more inclusive communities for all.
Thank you once again for joining us for this very special International Holocaust Remembrance Day commemoration. A special thank you to all who helped bring this program to our community today. Stay safe, stay healthy, and shalom.
Shalom.
I should be thanking for. I had a goodly share, and as I sit here in the comfort of my cozy chair, my fancy take me to the camp, Eastern tenement. 3 flights up in the rear to where my childhood days were spent. It wasn't much like paradise, but amidst the dirt of all there sit a little angel. An angel I fondly call my Yiddish mama. I need her more than ever now. My Yiddish mama, I'd like to kiss her wrinkled brow. I'd like to hold her thing one more as the day go by. And I ask her to forgive the things I did that made her cry. As low as never cared for fashion styles, her jewels and treasures she found in her baby's smile. For I know that I owe that I am today to this sweet little lady who's old and gray, to my wonderful Yiddish mama. Mama of mine, my Yiddish mama. I need her more than ever now, my Yiddish mama. I'd love to kiss her wrinkled brow. For I know that I owe that I am today to this sweet little lady who's old and gray, to my wonderful Yiddish mama. Mama of mine.